You're listening to the Cinemental Podcast.
Shall we begin?
Welcome back to the Cinemental Podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who is not a self-taught psychiatrist. He actually went to school, unlike self-taught demonologist Ed Warren. But my brother is a general and forensic psychiatrist, I think. I don't know if I believe you because you weren't self-taught. That's what you say you are.
Well, Jeff, interestingly enough, even though I did go to a lot of school and I did a residency in psychiatry, once you get out of that, you still have to self-teach yourself all the updates and all the things that are going on. So I would say, yeah, I think all physicians, once they get out of training, they continue to be self-taught. Jeff, lifelong learners are really what we all are, don't you think?
Okay, why haven't we done weekly 2-minute YouTube episodes of you being like, hey guys, psychiatrist here, just want to update you on the new DSM-5?
I don't know. I think that's more on the production end than my end.
Fair enough. Do you think you could adopt that voice, though? Because we need
Hey guys, let me tell you all about the DSM-5.
Okay, we want you to start your week off right with our podcast, so we drop a new episode every Monday at 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern, and you're listening to our Wednesday episode now, where we take a little bit of a deeper dive into a subject that we covered on Monday, and today we're continuing our discussion of The Conjuring. We talked about the movie and about the psychology of being scared on Monday, and today we're going to dive headfirst and tackle the pair that started it all, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Josh, anything specific we're going to talk about with them, just to kind of tease our listeners a little bit?
We're going to talk a little bit about their history, talk about some of the criticisms that they have faced, and then I want us to kind of shift into talking about personality, something that we started to talk about a little bit on Monday, and maybe some of the personality traits, maybe even some people with some personality disorders who might be more inclined to believe what the Warrens are selling.
It's not just who are Ed and Lorraine. It's who are the people who believe and buy into Ed and Lorraine are just as interesting to me from a mental health standpoint. It's that combination. A seller can't exist without buyers. Okay, Josh, where do you want to start with Ed and Warren? Can you give a little history? I think it's fascinating. Where did they come from? How did they get into doing what they're doing? And then if you know, tell me how they got into movies.
So Ed and Lorraine Warren were a husband and wife team who became probably America's most famous ghost hunters. Ed was a self-taught demonologist.
I love that so
Every
much.
time you're going to laugh every time. Lorraine claimed to have clairvoyant abilities. Together, they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research in 1952 and investigated over 10,000 cases of alleged hauntings. So they have some very famous cases, and some of their most famous cases inspired films like The Conjuring, Annabelle, and the Amityville Horror. From haunted dolls to demonic possessions, their stories have captivated millions of people, but it has not come without criticism. Skeptics and scientists have long challenged their claims, calling their evidence blarney, saying that they do not adhere to any scientific medicine.
I'm sorry. I'm sure that's real, but that's the first thing people say. Blarney!
Jeff, remember, this was in the 20th century.
I'm a self-taught demonologist. The very first thing somebody said was, Blarney! I don't believe that. That's nonsense. Nope, some dude in the back.
Blarney!
Blarney!
So those same folks who called Blarney on them, which, by the way, Jeff, anytime you do anything questionable...
Oh, I'm bringing it back, baby.
I'm going to call Blarney on that.
Oh, yeah. I'm calling Blarney.
The same folks who have called Blarney on them have accused them of reinforcing delusions and taking advantage of people who are in real need rather than promoting mental wellness and using true scientific principles. But despite their controversy, the legacy lives on. And their occult museum, home to the infamous Annabelle doll, was just recently purchased by comedian Matt Rife and YouTuber Elton Castee. Yeah, and they plan to reopen it to the public, even offering overnight stays.
I love that so much. I love Matt Rife. I think he's great.
I don't know him that well. Probably look him up a little bit later, but they, were pretty good self-promoters. They signed the rights to some of their stories to movie producers, and that's why you've seen the Amityville Horror, the Conjuring universe, things like that. It does seem that Lorraine Warren was the driving force behind that. She died in 2019 at the age of 92. Ed passed away in 2006 at the age of 79. She really kind of drove that machine.
I don't know if you know much about how the movies were made, but there are some things in the Warrens' life that I don't know are true or not, so I'm not going to speak to them. But she was very protective of how they were portrayed. Some might say, well, that's not honest. That's not taking a real honest account. I don't give a shit. It's her story to do with what she wants. She owns her own story. She's allowed to say, look, if you want to do something based on my life, here's what you can cover, here's what you can't. I don't have any issue with that in terms of the realism or whatever. As long as you're saying based on a true story, I think you're covered. If someone was like, hey, Jeff, let me make a movie about your life, I'd be like, cool, but gonna tell it, my way. And they're like, no, we want to cover everything. I'm like, well, then no, you don't get to make that decision. It's, if you want my rights, you got to play by my rules. So I don't have any problem with the fact that Lorraine was very protective of how they were portrayed.
That's their media empire with these movies. But both Ed and Lorraine appeared as themselves in the 1998 pilot episode of Road Rules All-Stars, where they were credited as demonologists.
That's amazing. Good for them. Stack that cash. Josh, when you and I have watched and covered a few of these movies before, movies that have to deal with possession, I'm always more akin to liking the movies where there's a nod to the relationship between science and the paranormal. In The Exorcist, he was a psychiatrist and then he became a priest. In The Pope's Exorcist, he makes it very clear. It's let's look for a mental health reason first. Let's rule that out. Then we'll go to possession. I think Ed and Lorraine stuck by that. At least they did in the film. Do you know if they did that in real life, if they worked with psychiatrists, if they promoted mental health first, or were they jumping to their product, which was, the expulsion of demons?
Well,
do we know anything about that?
That's one of the major criticisms of them, is that they jumped to that, bypassing the scientific method.
That's too bad.
Yeah, bypassing testing, hypothesis, and looking for repetition. And I think that this is one of the things where science gets a bad rap around paranormality. I know lots of scientists, myself included, who would love for there to be supernatural things and paranormal experiences. I would love for there to be superpowers, that people can have superpowers and things like that. I think that would be so awesome.
Yeah.
The problem is, when you subject studies like this to scientific scrutiny, having, a repeatable outcome of having a hypothesis and testing it under relatively strict rules of observation, nothing has been borne out as suggesting that there are ghosts, paranormal activity, supernatural things, stuff like that. Now, look, you can't ever discount somebody's experience, and people are experiencing things, and that's, of course, where, I come in as a mental health professional to try to help people understand and deal with the things that cause them distress. But if you want to look at it from a purely scientific standpoint, we just can't prove this stuff exists. I wish we could, and I know a lot of people that wish we could.
Yeah, and it's so funny because in the first movie, they make a real big deal about being able to take pictures. They bring in all of this scientific equipment and they try and photograph the demon, and it sort of makes you believe that they're actually able to scientifically track these things, when I don't think that was actually part of the way that Ed and Lorraine operated, which is a shame. But that is interesting, where it's with all the talk we have of possession, with all the priests throughout the years who've written books about possession, there's still no evidence that we can point to that's beyond reproach.
Here's a piece of the scientific process that I think people need to really understand. Ed and Lorraine may have had a lot of evidence to support this.
Sure.
But where this all falls down is the repeatability of the observation.
Right.
And that's what you have to understand. I mean, I'm so tired when I hear in popular culture, this study proves such and such.
Right.
No, it doesn't. One
Right.
study
Is one
doesn't
study.
prove anything.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
anybody versed in the scientific method knows that. It has to be reproducible results. There was
That's so
actually
funny, Josh.
there was actually a
When-
journal there, Jeff, for a while, and it was a little tongue-in-cheek, but it was hilarious. It was called the Journal of Irreproducible Results.
Interesting.
It was a little bit of scientific satire, all us funny scientists. Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah, sure.
But if it's not reproducible, it doesn't pass scientific muster.
I know that. I've known that for years. But what I think is fascinating is we had Kurt Yeager on the podcast last week, as you know, and he talked about how if you could do a trick once, you couldn't do the trick.
Right.
You had to do it 3 times in a row flawlessly before you could say you could do the trick. And it's like, even BMXers, even thrill seekers know, one-off doesn't,
One-off
that's
doesn't count.
One-off
Yeah.
doesn't count. You got to reproduce it. So, shout out to Kurt there, who, by the way, is a man of both science and faith. I think Kurt's fascinating, and I love talking with him about spirituality because he's very smart about it.
Well, Jeff, that's another thing that gets lost in our dialogue nowadays, in our highly polarized dialogue, is that science and faith are not incompatible.
Right. Here's where it's tricky, Josh, because at first, I think maybe 5 years ago, I would have taken a look at like Ed and Lorraine and been like, these are snake oil salesmen. And they're bad people, and it's wrong. But here's the thing, man. They're just people with a product to sell. And if they believe in it, is it wrong?
Boy,
because if you're knowingly selling something, that has no value, I think you're a piece of trash. But I think Ed and Lorraine actually believed that they were doing good. And there were probably times when they were like, we're just doing this one for the paycheck. But isn't that what we all do at some point? Can we really like black and white that one about like you're trash or you're a good person and here's the fine line? Or aren't there times where like someone sells somebody a hair product when it's like, dude, you don't need this, your hair's fine. We do these things all the time. And if it's giving people some manner of either closure or it betters their life in some way, were Ed and Lorraine actually doing any harm?
That's a good question, and I don't think I have a good answer to that, Jeff. I think you make a good point. If you're knowingly doing something that's false and exploiting somebody for the money, I think we can all agree that that's bad. What Ed and Lorraine were doing, it does appear for all intents and purposes that they were true believers.
Right.
But
do you think they were exploiting people?
I don't know. I don't know them well enough to say that. I think some people certainly do think that they were exploiting people. Some people may have been helped. Sometimes people getting validation that they're not crazy is incredibly powerful.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that we do have to say explicitly, and I'd love to get into talking to you about personality at this point. Folks who believe in the supernatural aren't crazy. We don't consider them to have a mental illness necessarily. And I use that word necessarily very cautiously, as you know. But, I mean, having the belief that there's something beyond what we can see, having the personality to be open to things like that isn't necessarily pathological.
Yeah, I know a lot of Christians that don't believe in like possession and ghosts, and there's certain things that they believe. Like anytime a Christian is like, "Well, that's just nonsense. That can't be proven." I'm like, neither can your God. And if there's one thing we know, Josh, that I don't like, it's hypocrisy.
We do know that, Jeff. That is part of your personality.
That is part of my personality.
Yeah.
Let's change topics a little bit and talk about the kind of people who get kind of taken in by this. And I don't mean taken in by this as it's a scam, but the people who engage in this. I don't know a better way to ask this question, so I'm just going to ask it. Are we pathologizing oddness and weirdness? And can you explain to me what I just asked?
Jeff, that was a fantastic question that I wrote for you to ask me. Look, I think the entry into this conversation is, are people who believe in the supernatural, people who believe that they've been possessed, people who believe in ghosts, are they crazy? Do they have a mental illness? And look, I know I'm using the word crazy, and I know that's a trigger word for lots of people.
Right.
It's a trigger word for me too, but it is in our popular culture. And the direct answer is no. Beliefs of that nature, if they are within your socio-cultural religious upbringing, are totally fine and non-pathologic. So if you're in a society, and I think we are in a society that says there might be ghosts, if you believe that there are ghosts, that in and of itself is not pathologic.
Right.
However, what have I always said ends up being the trigger from a behavior or thought or an emotion moving from non-pathologic to pathologic?
When it infringes on the rights of others.
That's one of them, but it's more broadly if it impacts your function.
Oh, yeah. If it impacts your life.
Your
If
functioning.
it impacts your life in a negative way.
Yeah, in a negative way. And that's where we start to see some people have some pathology. So the belief that there are ghosts, that's one thing. The unshakable belief that you are possessed by a ghost, despite any and all evidence being presented to you, that becomes more of a delusion, a fixed false belief. Especially if you start to do things like, well, I'm not going to sleep in my house because that's where the ghost is, and I'm not going to eat food because the ghost might be this. That's when it starts to be
But you just said when that's not true. Can you actually say that it's not? Because if you can say that it's not true, then why aren't we calling these people crazy for having that belief? And I know that the difference is when they start to harm themselves. But like if you're just standing by and someone's crazy and they're believing crazy stuff, but it's like, it's not affecting me. It doesn't bother me because they haven't like hurt themselves. Mm-hmm. It's still problematic. It's still them on the way to hurt themselves. You know, it's like, oh, this guy's not suicidal because he hasn't jumped off that bridge yet.
Oh no,
we wouldn't say that.
Yeah, no, I think you're dicing it too fine. I have seen some people who have a fixed false belief, who have a delusion that such and such is real when it is clearly not, and I would not diagnose them with a mental illness because it's not impacting them in any way. Here's a specific example.
No, hold on. I want to ask you a specific question though.
Okay.
Before that example, has there ever been a time where someone's fixed false belief hasn't gotten in the way of their function, but you know it's leading down a path where it will, and you have to intervene?
Boy, that's really tough because having to intervene and having the power to intervene starts to buck up against their rights and the law.
Totally get it.
Can I say, yes, I think that's going to impact you at some point in the future? I have said that many times.
Sure.
I don't know how many times I've been right, but yeah, people have that right. People have a constitutional right to have a delusion.
But you're not all of a sudden deciding that they have a delusion that's problematic because they've hurt themselves. You believe occasionally someone has a delusion that is problematic before they hurt themselves, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I'm getting to, because this is where I think it's so hard of like,
yep.
But
Jeff,
is it our responsibility to change people's beliefs or protect themselves?
Yeah, but
is it our responsibility to protect themselves from their beliefs?
Here's the thing, Jeff. They don't get in front of me until that delusion or that belief has started to interfere with their behavior, right? It's selection bias.
I hear you, but I'm going to tie this back to Ed and Lorraine.
Okay.
I think you could say that like having this delusion and then being taken advantage of negatively impacts you. So why aren't we stopping the Ed and Lorraines of the world before they take advantage of people's delusions?
Well, again, I mean, that gets into areas of the law.
Do you think it's that simple?
I don't think it's that simple.
Then I'm asking, like, what do we do about the Ed and Lorraines possibly in the future where these people are, even if they believe it, they're taking advantage of people. They're selling something that we know has no value, like we talked about earlier, taking financial advantage of people with delusion.
Well, again, I don't know that they necessarily have these folks, all these folks. I mean, you're painting with a very broad brush. We don't know that all these folks have delusion. They have a belief. They have an experience. Like, I want to know what the answer is. People who are seeking out Ed and Lorraine, or who Ed and Lorraine sought out, by the way, that happened as well. They didn't necessarily believe 100% I'm being possessed. They were looking for answers to things they couldn't explain.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily go that route.
All right, fair enough. So, Josh, this might be the worst segue of all time. We talked about Ed and Lorraine being, very successful, and whether or not they've earned it, whether or not, that sort of thing should be allowed. There's a really interesting conversation that's coming up in the news and sort of online right now, and so I want your take on it. And here's the controversy. There's a whole lot of people on the left who say billionaires should not exist.
Okay.
And it's kind of just a nice little, tagline to be like, it's just ridiculous to have that amount of money. Taylor Swift is a billionaire. Okay. And so the question is it okay that Taylor Swift is a billionaire? And there's a lot of people on the left who are like, it's okay because of this. And well, she's not really a billionaire because some of its assets and blah, blah, blah. But I'm curious your take on just this topic of like, do you have any issues with Taylor Swift being a billionaire? And do you have an issue with billionaires? Because I actually don't. And I am a leftist, but I don't have an issue with billionaires. I have an issue with the way that a lot of billionaires have made their money. I don't have any issue with the way Taylor Swift has made her money, and I think she deserves to be a billionaire. Where are you on this one?
Well, I'm pro Tay-Tay. She seems to have worked her butt off. She seems to have been very shrewd in how she's managed her money and her fame. And if people want to buy the product she's selling, more power to her.
That's the thing. We know what she's selling. And she's amazingly popular. She sells out arenas. She's on tour all the time. She keeps pumping out good albums. That's the kind of person who should be a billionaire. As long as she's not trampling on, the rights of others, as long as she's not, going to third world countries and putting kids to labor, like Apple did, I don't have any issue with someone accumulating $1 billion. Just pay your taxes that we've all agreed that you're supposed to pay. Don't take advantage of people. Taylor Swift is exactly who I think should be a billionaire. It's the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world who, got rich because he didn't tell us that we were actually the product he was selling. That was pretty shady. Like, those are the types of people that I have a problem being billionaires. It's the Bezoses who don't pay taxes and sort of force cities and states to give them amazing tax breaks to house their center. Like, those are the people who shouldn't be billionaires. But like someone accumulating a lot of money through hard work, I don't have any issue with that.
I don't have an issue with it either. I think that it's when you're talking about money at that scale, I don't think you or I, even in the relatively privileged places that we operate in, have any idea of the scope of how all that money gets made. So I don't know that we can say definitively, people aren't being taken advantage of. I think they 100%. For sure are in some ways. I think where we fall down is our society really does need to tax that appropriately, to make sure that they pay their fair share, and to make sure that's actually money that goes into the public coffers, and that we don't let them get away with, well, I donate so much money to such and such, or I have my foundation, that I control. Because like you just said, they kind of extort municipalities to give them tax breaks so that they'll open things. That just gives them so much power. That gives them more power than one person should have in terms of, vote or things like that. So that's how I think our society should deal with the ultra wealthy. And I think, unfortunately, America's been sold a load of goods about not taxing the ultra rich appropriately because of the holdout that, well, it could be you someday. I mean, come on.
No, 100%. That's always been the big lie. But I think the leftists have gotten this one wrong of like, we should outlaw billionaires.
Well, that's stupid.
That's silly. It's silly.
That doesn't make a lot of sense. It seems like getting to that would involve guillotines, which never goes great. Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought that was interesting in the news where it's like, I'm usually and who knows, maybe I'm turning more into Bill Maher in my old age where I used to be a leftist and now I'm like more centrist. But, you
got better hair than Bill Maher.
Oh, facts. Thank you for that. All right, Josh. So people at home, if you're watching, might notice that we had a little outfit change. We're recording this on a different day, but we wanted to do our top 5 this week. And someone in the comments made a claim that I wouldn't do this for liberals. They said this was really cheap. It's a cheap shot at conservatives, and I wouldn't dare do this for the liberals. Hold my beer. I'm happy to lampoon anybody because there's just as much fun stuff to make fun of on the left. So today I'm doing the top 5 list of the most ridiculous leftist superheroes, and this is a list, of course, that nobody asked for. This is the left I don't know what we're going to call them, the left Patriot Pack. I think the Patriot Pack was the
I will
conservative.
point out, I mean, should you even rank them 1 to 5, or aren't they probably all equal?
They're probably all equal. There you go. Well said, Josh.
Okay, Jeff, do you have any honorable mentions?
I do. So honorable mention, didn't quite make the top 5, but still very worthwhile and useful to the team. He's just not in every like Avengers movie. The pronoun paladin. He's able to blend it. They are able to blend in anywhere. Male, female, they're a regular chameleon of gender and sex. You'll never know when the pronoun paladin is watching or who they are. And their pronouns are he, ro.
Nice. Number 5.
Number 5 is the trigger knot. He has super strength, and he can detect microaggressions up to 300 miles away. And he meets microaggressions with macro over-the-top aggression. You want to ask, where are you from? That gets you kicked in the middle of the ocean. If you say, you don't look gay, prepare for a swift kick in the dick. I don't see color. Well, you're about to see a fist in your face. That is the trigger knot at number 5.
Jeff, I think the trigger knot is so awesome.
He probably could have been higher.
Trigger knot. Okay, Jeff, who's number 4?
So number 4 is a pretty unassuming character named Aoife Menendez. Quiet and unassuming. No one's actually met her, but she's seemingly everywhere, wreaking havoc, burning down stores, and plotting against the far right. She's basically a ninja. Her official name in the group is Aunt Aoife. And that's our number 4.
Okay, Jeff. Who's number 3?
Number 3 is Captain Safe Space. He creates a protective bubble around anyone who's offended by words, microaggressions, or conflicting opinions. His only weakness is if someone says, I'd like to play devil's advocate. His catchphrase, you're safe as long as you agree with me in every possible way. And that is Captain Safe Space.
Excellent. I assume he shoots bubble wrap from his hands.
Correct.
That's awesome. All right, Jeff, number 2.
Number 2 is the virtue signaler. Able to detect any injustice in the world at any time, which I think, Josh, you can agree would be a pretty amazing superpower.
Sure would.
And he's going to tell you about it through an angry social media post. Is he going to do anything about it? Of course not. That's not his job. That's your job. But he will tell you about it while drinking a fine wine and wearing clothes made from the finest child artisans in third world countries.
Oof. Brutal burn. Okay, Jeff, tell us number 1.
Number 1 is Captain Planet. He's our hero. He's going to take pollution down to 0. I know he already exists, but come on, man. That's the number 1 left superhero of all time is Captain Planet.
Captain. Wow.
Josh, what do you think of that list?
I think you captured it all, Jeff. It's pretty inclusive. I don't know that it's all inclusive.
Sure.
But pretty good. Pretty good for a middle-aged white man.
Right. Thank you very much. And a middle-aged white man was definitely the right person to make this list that absolutely no one asked for. You're welcome, America. So those are your 5 liberal superheroes who will be fighting your 5 conservative heroes coming to a theater sometime in probably 2029. Animation does take a long time, and these are all animated superheroes. So,
Jeff, I like to think that it's going to be an ultimate team-up between the two sides.
No, these are just a bunch of bitchy, crabby superheroes who are just gonna take each other out.
Oh, yep. Okay. Yep. my bad, yo.
On both sides. All right. Glad we were able to have a little fun there, Josh. I think that's it for me for Conjuring and for Ed and Lorraine Warren. Super interesting stuff. There's so many more things I want to talk about with the type of people who are, taking advantage or not of people, but just that strength of belief is so interesting to me from a mental health standpoint. Thanks as always for watching or listening to Cinemental and our continuing coverage of The Conjuring. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we'd love to hear what you would like us to cover next. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I take a deeper dive into screenwriting, both available on the Large and in Charge channel on YouTube. Follow Dr. Josh Jones, America's Psychiatrist, on Blue Sky. This has been a Large and in Charge production. For Josh Jones, I am Jeff Jones, and we will see you next week, probably for Rounders. I really want to cover Rounders and gambling. Talk about gambling.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.